US Congress won't pass sanctions against Russia without Trump's approval. Trump calls Europe's sanctions on Russia weak, and how Poland's Sikorski urges allies to intercept Russian targets over Ukraine. We will talk about this with political analyst, European Leadership Network, UK member Alexandra Filippenko. Alexandra, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Alexandra, US President Donald Trump called the European Union's sanctions on Russia too weak and urged European partners to impose stricter measures, reports Rapid Response 47. The president described European countries as his friends, but expressed frustration that they continue to purchase Russian oil. How do you think, what is the realistic time frame for significantly reducing Europe's energy dependence on Moscow? And is it fair to interpret US policy as an attempt to step into Russia's role as Europe's principal supplier of oil and gas?
On the one hand, I must say where President Trump is not right. He is right. Of course, European countries, of course, the European Union should have stopped long time ago. They should not receive, should not buy, most importantly, Russian oil. Of course, from the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, most European countries tried to get rid of any contracts, of anything with Russia, because they didn't want to sponsor Russia's war machine, because we all understand. Of course, the economy is, even though Russia is not a democratic country, but the economy, it works everywhere the same. They need money to produce weapons that they kill Ukrainians with. They need money for all that weaponry. They need money to pay for those soldiers that go on the front line. To occupy Ukrainian territory and Ukrainian cities, they need money for that. The army is basically, it's not fully contract army, but they pay quite a lot. And this is why a lot of people decide to go to the armed forces to take part in that quote-unquote special military operation. That is why there is no full mobilization of Russians, for example, because it's somewhere over there, that special military operation, but they need to sponsor it somehow. In order to sponsor it, of course, they need to sell oil, they need to sell gas, they need to sell uranium, etc., etc., etc. And the European Union basically stopped buying Russian oil, and is moving towards not buying Russian gas. The only two countries that are buying Russian oil right now, they are not fully, let's say, ready to stop doing it immediately. Of course, we're talking about Hungary and Slovakia. And if we are looking into those countries that are buying Russian oil right now, they are moving towards getting rid of Russian contracts by the end of 2027. It's been a plan for a long time now. Of course, if we're talking about European countries and the European Union as a whole, it's not an autocratic regime within the European Union. And of course, we understand many European leaders are, first of all, looking at the pockets of their citizens than at general political decision of not buying Russian oil, for example. So this is why it's been very difficult for many countries to get rid of those contracts immediately, but they have a plan. They have a strict plan to get rid of everything, buying everything from Russia, all natural resources, including oil, including gas, by the end of 2027. So although President Trump once again has made it clear that he will not impose any sanctions on Russia until Europe tightens restrictions and stops buying Russian oil, we understand that it doesn't mean that this will happen immediately. President Trump is saying that they're not doing their job. Europe must unite and act. Europe is our friend, and I'm quoting President Trump here, but they continue to buy oil from Russia. We cannot be the only ones acting in full force. If Europe buys Russian oil, I don't want that. And the sanctions they are imposing are not enough. They are not tough. I'm ready to impose sanctions, but they must tighten their measures and make them actually push Russia. And that is what I am planning to do. This is what President Trump said. And my question is where he's wrong. He's right, of course. We are talking about that. But we're having this reality where European countries have that plan by the end of 2027. And of course, when we're talking about buying Russian resources, it goes without saying that it's way less, 10 times less than it was prior to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Of course, the war was already ongoing. After 2014, European countries continued buying Russian oil, continued buying Russian gas and Russian resources. But if we compare, for example, 2021 and 2024, oh, it's such a big difference. Of course, it goes without saying that Europe is moving towards the right direction. But what President Trump is doing is that he's showcasing it, that he's stressing that this is Europe's war. This is war on the European continent. European Union should take the lead. European Union should be an example of everyone who is not buying Russian resources. And of course, this is a great restriction on the European Union. And without those sanctions, without the American sanctions, it would be difficult to think about moving towards actually any negotiation. Although President Trump has said that he understands that he has to be involved. Still, he has to be involved. He understands that. But without Europe taking the lead, he doesn't want to move forward. He doesn't want to be more tough on Russia than the European Union. And this is also a way to explain to American audience, to explain to the Americans why there are no new sanctions towards Russia, why there is nothing like that. And of course, we understand that right now, Congress is controlled by Republicans. Congress is controlled by MAGA Republicans, by Trump Republicans, I would put it in this way. And they are right now moving towards the midterm elections in November 2026, just a little bit over a year until the midterms. So we understand that right now, Republicans, especially MAGA Republicans, they will only move forward if President Trump says that he likes their idea, et cetera, No sanctions are going to be implemented without President Trump's go, let's say. But that go of President Trump, that green light from President Trump, depends on the European Union also, depends on Europeans buying Russian oil. And even though there are only 2 countries doing that, but we understand that for President Trump, it's the European Union. It's them, all of them, buying oil and gas, including gas. We must also stress that, although President Trump was only talking about oil. So this is a way to, let's say, make Europe tighten its grip on the one hand, and on the other hand, to stress that this is Europe's war. This is European war, and Europe must take the lead.
Alexandra, Mike Johnson, a Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, has said that Congress will not adopt new sanctions against Russia without agreement from President Donald Trump, as you said. However, he has acknowledged that the need for sanctions has been long overdue. Is there currently enough bipartisan support in Congress to override a potential presidential veto and impose new sanctions on Russia without President Trump's consent? It's interesting.
Yes, we understand that there is. But there is this, let's say, difficulty, because U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham and Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick plan to link new restrictions against Russia to a bill on U.S. government funding, according to Politico. At least they are quoting Lindsey Graham. They're saying that the Republicans in the House and the Senate who are pushing for more sanctions against Russia have come up with a new strategy. Attach a measure to the future bill. This idea is to include this measure in the temporary government funding bill. So this might go through, although we're hearing exactly what you quoted from Mike Johnson, from the Speaker of the House, that only Donald Trump must give that green light. And this difficulty is also, although we understand from Lindsey Graham's quotes, I must say, we understand from Lindsey Graham's previous interviews that there are at least 84 senators, but actually most probably 85 senators out of 100 senators, and that's a huge number, that there are enough senators for that bill, of Russian sanctions bill, to go through, at least in the Senate. And we understand that Lindsey Graham didn't want to go through with those sanctions, didn't want to go through with that bill after he met President Trump at the golf course, because they played golf before Senate's recess. And after that, Lindsey Graham said that he will wait for President Trump's actions. He will wait for President Trump. What will President Trump do in the nearest future? And we understand that Lindsey Graham is also, he's not working on that 19th package of European sanctions, of course, that is expected to be announced this month. But although he is in the loop of what is happening over there, and the Treasury Department, the US Treasury Department, is signaling its willingness to expand secondary tariffs, but no new measures have been still announced. So we can, with a certain degree of certainty, we can say that most probably that bill will not go through right now if President Trump doesn't want it, because it all depends on President Trump right now. There are enough votes. There are enough people. There are enough co-authors of that bill. So it's not just someone who will decide will he vote on it or not on the day of the vote, but they're the co-sponsors of the bill, the co-authors, co-sponsors of the bill. Lindsey Graham said that he has 84 co-sponsors, and some reports say that 85 out of 100. So it will go through in flying colors. The only question is, why doesn't Lindsey Graham want to go through with it? And the answer most probably is that President Trump doesn't want to go through with it.
Alexandra, President Donald Trump said the animosity between Russian President dictator Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is incomprehensible, and suggested he may need to step in to mediate. He said, "I will probably have to intervene," Trump told reporters, adding that the two leaders hate each other so much that they can barely talk and are simply unable to communicate. What specific role does Donald Trump envision for himself in mediating between President Putin and President Zelensky now?
President Trump, we know him. He presents himself as the master of the deals. The Art of the Deal is his book that he likes to quote from, and he likes to talk about. Art of the Deal is what he is known for. And as an artful deal maker, President Trump says that only he can actually mediate right now. And this shows that he is not ready to give up on the idea of maybe even coming together with President Zelensky and Putin together at the table, sitting down, discussing something. And this, although right now I think also with a certain degree of certainty, we can say that this is not too realistic right now, as of now, at least while Russia is continuing bombardment of Ukrainian cities, and Russian drones and Russian rockets are flying to Ukrainian cities. But for President Trump, it's important to explain to the Americans that he is there, that he is not giving up. because we see how the Americans want this war to end. 67% of Americans, according to Gallup poll, wants the war to end with absolutely no control of Russia in Ukrainian territories. They don't want Russia to control any of the Ukrainian territories. So we are not talking about going back to the borders of, for example, 2022 or to the borders before 2014. We're talking about the borders of 1991, the official, legal borders, borders universally accepted borders of Ukraine that are according to the law, to the international law. This is what Americans want to see. And so President Trump understands that this is what Americans want. It doesn't, the party affiliation doesn't work here. It's Democrats and Republicans. So 67% want that. And this means that President Trump cannot just say, oh, I give up and let Europe take care of it. I will not get into that at all. He cannot afford doing that. If President Trump had a rating of 70%, for example, then he could. But his rating is not as high. His rating is around 40%, 42, 43%. So he cannot afford giving up on Ukraine, giving up on the peaceful, somehow moving towards peace in Ukraine, at least a ceasefire in Ukraine. And moreover, we understand that President Trump many times have said that he is concerned about what is happening, not because there are Americans dying there, but the people are dying there, not American soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers and Russian soldiers and Ukrainian peaceful residents of Ukrainian cities. They are suffering and they're dying and they're being killed by Russia. So that is what President Trump is saying. He just cannot afford giving up. And so this is why he says that he will mediate, he will continue to be there. It's a signal to the American audience, first of all. It's a signal to the Americans, first of all, that yes, he will be there, he will continue being there, he will continue talking, he will continue trying to do something. And especially, I think I would like to take note of a very interesting interview of Keith Kellogg, a special representative of Donald Trump, the special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, who said that Russia is effectively losing the war in Ukraine, despite some advances. And this is a message by Keith Kellogg to President Trump. And in that interview, Keith Kellogg talked about what does it mean to win or lose. And if they were winning, they would be in Kiev, said Keith Kellogg, or in Odessa. They would have changed the government, he said Keith Kellogg. He emphasized that advancing by meters, not kilometers, he used miles, but anyways, with over 1 million killed and wounded, it's not a success, but a disaster comparable to the scale of World War II. Keith Kellogg talked at length about how many soldiers died in Afghanistan, how many soldiers died in Vietnam War, and how many soldiers are dead and wounded on the Russian side right now. So he talked about Russia effectively losing the war in Ukraine. And this message to President Trump is most probably what he wants to convey and what he wants President Trump to hear. For President Trump, not only to stay in the loop just because he cannot give up on Ukraine because of the American citizens, but also to push in a certain direction. So all those things coming together, they mean that President Trump will and most probably really stay as a kind of a mediator. His attempts at mediation we saw in the past 6 months, and most probably will continue to see more of them.
Alexandra, about a signal to the citizens of Poland, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has proposed that the West intercept Russian drones and missiles in Ukrainian airspace. Tagesschau reports. The proposal came after Russian drones entered Polish airspace, and Le Monde also reported that hundreds of European and American politicians support Ukrainians' Sky Shield initiative. The program would allow Europe to shoot down Russian drones and missiles over western and central Ukraine. Do NATO members have the political will to authorize intercept operations inside Ukrainian airspace, and under what legal frameworks could such actions be justified?
Well, we understand that those drones that are coming into Romania, that are coming into Poland, that are coming into Lithuania, they are potentially those drones that are maybe not to damage effectively right now, damage these countries right now, but to make sure how active are the systems of NATO countries and of European countries. How can they be intercepted? How far can they fly in? What can they do inside those countries? So if before we talked about hybrid attacks, these are potential actual attacks. And we understand that this is very, very dangerous. And those drones that fell in Poland and that were intercepted over Polish territory, those drones are potentially extremely dangerous, because what can be done with those drones, for example? Can tactical nuclear weapons be flown with those drones, for example, or any kind of biological weapons or anything? If Russia is saying that these are not our drones, of course, we've heard Russia saying that these are not their soldiers in Crimea, for example, that occupied Crimea, and later on it appeared that these were indeed Russian soldiers, and even Putin talked about that. And now Russia is saying, oh no, these are not our drones. We don't know how they came about. Probably UFOs flying from somewhere, from Mars or from somewhere else. But they are not admitting that these are Russian drones. And of course, for NATO countries, for European countries, it is grave danger. And talking about NATO, talking about the alliance, maybe without the American, again, green light, they will not be able to do that. But NATO are the forces that are combined from the forces of the European countries. And the European Union, and especially the coalition of the willing, has a mind of its own, let's put it this way. And of course, we understand if especially Germany, for example, helps Poland, Germany helps, again, Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia or Finland or any countries that are on the border with Russia, this will be this will make those countries safer. And talking about Ukrainian airspace, of course, we can talk about, again, as Russia is saying that these are not their drones, missiles that are intercepting drones or missiles above Ukrainian airspace. It can also be said that those weapons that are intercepting missiles above Ukrainian airspace from the European Union, they're seeing those missiles and drones as a danger to their own territory. They see it as a danger. So this is why they're doing that, because we've seen those unknown drones, unknown, quote unquote, unknown drones, unknown where they're coming from, those drones coming in to European and NATO airspace. So maybe they need to secure, for example, Ukraine. They need to secure countries that are on the border with NATO countries, on the border with European countries, with the European Union countries, I mean, of course. So maybe they can justify this by saying that they see those drones, those rockets, those missiles flying into Ukrainian airspace as a potential danger for their countries. So this is why they want to intercept it. Although, of course, we understand that all these systems are extremely expensive, And it's difficult to say how much European countries can put into those intercepting drones and missiles in Ukrainian airspace. But we understand also that NATO countries, although maybe not having enough political will, but the European Union and the European countries might and should and most probably will have more political will. And moreover, this might be, again, this is just an idea, might be applauded by the White House, might be applauded by President Trump, because all he wants is Europe to be more active. All he wants is Europe to take the lead, to take the main part in securing Ukraine and securing Ukrainian airspace. So if it doesn't have to do with NATO per se, meaning American air forces, of course, and American forces in general, then we might see actually these things happening, especially having this possibility to justify it by saying that they see it as a danger to their own territory after those unknown UFO drones coming into European countries.
Alexandra, I sincerely thank you for this insightful conversation. As always, a political analyst, European Leadership Network UK member Alexandra Filippenko was with us today. I wish you all the best and see you soon.
Thank you very much. See you soon.